My brothers and sisters, imagine being told that one single failure defines the rest of your life. Imagine being convinced that because you stumbled once, you are doomed to crawl forever. That is the lie so many people believe after failing just one test. But let me remind you today, failure is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your strength. It is the spark that ignites resilience, the moment that awakens hidden potential, and the reason you will rise stronger than ever before. You failed one test, but failure itself can be a hidden blessing. It is often in the moments of greatest disappointment that people discover their true potential. You see, when everything goes your way, when every door opens effortlessly, you may never discover the strength that lies within you. But when you stumble, when you fall, when you are forced to start again, that is when the deepest treasures of your character are revealed. Many people who shine today were once buried in failure. They were told they would never make it. They were mocked, laughed at, underestimated, and even rejected repeatedly. Yet those very rejections became the fire that refined them. They became stronger, more focused, more determined, and more humble. They did not let one test determine their destiny. They chose to see failure not as the final word, but as a whisper telling them to adjust, to realign, to work harder, and to trust more deeply in the plan of the Almighty. You failed one test, but think of the countless ways in which failure can redirect your path towards something greater. Imagine a person who desperately wants to pass a certain exam because they believe their entire life depends on it. They study, they pray, they put in effort, but they still fail. At first, their world crumbles. They feel hopeless, defeated, and lost. But later, as time unfolds, they realize that had they passed, they would have walked into a career that was not suited for them, a life that would not have brought them peace. The failure saved them from a lifetime of unhappiness. What seemed like a setback was, in fact, a redirection towards something far better. The Almighty knows the unseen. He knows what you cannot comprehend today. Sometimes your failure is His protection, His love, His mercy in disguise. What you see as rejection may actually be selection. You were not rejected. You were selected for something better, but you simply cannot see it yet. This is why patience after failure is so important. It allows you to breathe, to pause, to trust, and to wait for the doors that will open in your favor. You failed one test, but that does not erase the effort you put in. Never think your hard work was wasted. Every page you read, every hour you spent, every moment you invested, it built you, it strengthened your mind, it disciplined your soul. Even if the result did not turn out the way you wanted, the process has already changed you into a better version of yourself. And that transformation will benefit you in ways you may not yet recognize. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. Every inventor, every scholar, every thinker, every leader who ever made a difference walked through the valley of failure before reaching the peak of achievement. Some failed hundreds of times before finding one way that worked. If they had stopped after their first failed attempt, we would not even know their names today. But because they persisted, because they saw failure as feedback instead of defeat, they are remembered for their greatness. You failed one test, but you are not a failure. There is a difference between failing at something and being a failure. One is an event, the other is an identity. Do not confuse the two. You may fail in your studies, in your career, in a relationship, or in a project, but that does not make you a failure as a person. It simply makes you human. The true failure is when you give up on yourself, when you refuse to try again, when you let despair consume you. As long as you are willing to rise, you have not truly failed. You failed one test, but in that moment, you gained valuable wisdom. You now know the areas where you need to improve. You now know the mistakes to avoid next time. You now know the importance of preparation, of consistency, of seeking guidance. Without failure, you may never have recognized these lessons. The pain you feel today is shaping you into someone who will walk with greater confidence tomorrow. You failed one test, but think of the countless tests in life that are far more important. Tests of character, of honesty, of compassion, of integrity. If you pass those, you have achieved far more than any exam paper could ever offer. There are people who pass every worldly test, but fail the test of kindness, humility, and sincerity. Do not let one result make you forget the broader purpose of your life. Your true success lies in remaining steadfast, grateful, and connected to your Creator, no matter the outcome of one moment in this worldly journey. You failed one test, but even in that failure, there is hope. Hope that you will grow. Hope that you will rise stronger. Hope that you will discover new opportunities you never imagined. Hope that your heart will soften, that your humility will increase, that your reliance on the Almighty will deepen. And hope that tomorrow will bring a result you once thought impossible. You failed one test, but this is how you choose to respond. Some allow failure to paralyze them, to convince them they are worthless. Others use it as fuel, as motivation to strive harder. The choice is yours. Will you sit in despair, or will you rise with determination? Will you drown in regret, or will you use the pain to push you forward? Remember, your future is not written by your failures. It is written by your response to them. You failed one test, but failure teaches you empathy. When you experience loss, when you taste disappointment, you become more compassionate toward others. You learn to comfort those who are struggling, to support those who are hurting, to guide those who feel lost. Failure connects us as human beings, reminding us that nobody is perfect, that everyone has scars, that everyone is fighting battles we may not see. You failed one test, but you are still blessed beyond measure. Think of the eyes with which you read, the ears with which you listen, the heart that still beats within your chest. Think of the family, the friends, the opportunities, the shelter, the food, the safety that surround you. Sometimes one small failure blinds us to the countless blessings we still enjoy. Gratitude is a powerful lens that can turn failure into perspective. Instead of focusing on what went wrong, focus on what is still right, and you will find the strength to keep moving. You failed one test, but the Almighty has not abandoned you. He is closer to you in your moments of pain than in your moments of ease. He hears your cries, He knows your struggles, and He is aware of every tear that falls from your eyes. Turn to Him, not with words of anger, but with words of hope. Ask Him to guide you, to strengthen you, to open doors for you. When you connect your heart to Him, failure becomes easier to bear, and success becomes a blessing you remain humble about. You failed one test, but sometimes failure is what softens your heart, what brings you back to prayer, what teaches you sincerity. Without it, you may have drifted into arrogance or forgetfulness. With it, you are reminded of your need for Him. In that sense, failure can be a greater success than the result you were chasing. You failed one test, but life goes on. The sun still rises, the world still moves, the opportunities are still there. Do not let one dark moment convince you that your entire life is dark. Even the longest night is followed by dawn. Even the coldest winter is followed by spring. Even the heaviest storm eventually clears, leaving behind fresh air and new life. Your situation is no different. You failed one test, but failure may be the very thing that inspires you to greatness. How many times have you heard stories of people who, after failing miserably, went on to achieve unimaginable heights? They look back and say, had I not failed then, I would not be where I am now. You too can one day tell that story. You too can look back at this moment and smile, knowing that it was not the end, but the beginning of something far greater. You failed one test, but that very failure can ignite within you a new sense of purpose. It can stir your heart in ways that comfort never could. When life is easy, we sometimes float without direction, taking things for granted, assuming that success will always come without struggle. Yet when life challenges us, when it shakes us, when it pulls away what we thought was guaranteed, that is when we truly awaken. That is when the soul searches deeper. That is when the mind reflects more sincerely. And that is when the heart turns in humility to the one who controls all outcomes. You failed one test, but failure is not humiliation unless you allow it to be. Real humiliation is when you stop believing in yourself, when wise. You stop trusting the plan of the Almighty, when you stop making effort because you think nothing will ever change. As long as you keep trying, as long as you keep pushing, as long as you keep praying, you are far from humiliated. You are dignified in the eyes of the Almighty. The dignity of a person is not tied to worldly results, but to the consistency of effort and the sincerity of their heart. You failed one test, but failure itself can humble you in a way that success never could. Humility is a jewel. It keeps you grounded. It protects you from arrogance. It helps you appreciate the blessings you still have. When you fail, you realize that you are not in control of everything. You realize that your knowledge has limits, your strength has limits, your power has limits. And in that realization, you discover the boundless strength of the Almighty, the one with no limits, the one who never fails. This realization can transform your entire outlook on life, making you more compassionate, more patient, and more understanding of others who struggle. You failed one test, but perhaps through this, you are being prepared for something far more meaningful. Think about the people who go through hardship, who face rejection, who stumble and fall, only to later realize that those moments shaped them into leaders, thinkers, inventors, and believers who impacted the world. If their journey had been smooth, if every attempt had succeeded, they may never have developed the strength, the wisdom, or the resilience required to achieve their true calling. You may not realize it now, but every failure is molding you, chiseling away the parts of you that are weak, sharpening the parts of you that will shine. You failed one test, but you are still surrounded by opportunities to grow. Each day brings a fresh chance to write a new story. The pen is in your hand and the ink is not finished. One result, one rejection, one failure cannot erase all the chapters still waiting to be written. In fact, this single setback might make the story of your life even more inspiring, because people are not inspired by those who always succeeded effortlessly. They are inspired by those who stumbled, fell, and then rose again with courage. You failed one test, but within that failure is a chance to renew your intentions. Ask yourself why you are striving, who you are striving for, and what truly matters at the end of the day. Sometimes failure forces us to confront questions we had been avoiding. Were we chasing this goal for the right reasons? Were we putting our trust in ourselves alone, forgetting the one who controls all affairs? Were we neglecting other aspects of our lives while obsessing over one outcome? Failure clears away illusions and reminds us of what truly deserves our energy and attention. You failed one test, but you are not defined by a single moment. Your life is a long journey filled with twists, turns, valleys, and peaks. One valley does not erase the mountains you will climb. One storm does not cancel out the sunshine that will return. One dark night does not erase the promise of a new dawn. You must remember that life is not about never falling, but about rising every time you fall. The strongest hearts are not those that never break, but those that break and heal, and in the process become unshakable. You failed one test, but that pain you feel right now can be the very fuel that propels you forward. Pain has a way of motivating us like nothing else. It pushes us to try harder, to focus more, to prove ourselves. Let that disappointment be the fire that drives you to study longer, to work smarter, to plan better, to trust deeper. Do not waste your pain by drowning in despair. Use it as energy to climb higher. Every tear that falls can water the seeds of tomorrow's success if you let it. You failed one test, but think of the strength it gives you to empathize with others. How could you truly comfort someone who failed if you had never failed yourself? How could you truly understand the heartbreak of loss if you had never tasted it? Failure allows you to walk into the lives of others with compassion, to hold their hand and say, I know how this feels, but I also know we can rise again. Your failure can make you a source of light in someone else's darkness, and that in itself is a tremendous gift. You failed one test, but what about the countless victories you have already experienced? Think of the challenges you overcame before, the moments you thought you could never endure but did. Think of the sleepless nights you survived, the heavy burdens you carried, the struggles you faced that once seemed impossible. Did you not rise from them? Did you not grow stronger through them? This failure is no different. It is another mountain to climb, and you have already proven that you can climb. You failed one test, but perhaps it was meant to save you from something greater. Many times what we see as loss is actually protection. The Almighty may have saved you from arrogance, from harm, from heading down a path that would have harmed your soul. You may never know exactly what danger you were spared, but trust that the one who knows all things allowed this failure for your ultimate good. Every closed door carries with it the promise of another door, perhaps one that will open with ease, with blessings, with opportunities far beyond your imagination. You failed one test, but failure can teach you patience in ways that success cannot. It is easy to smile when everything goes your way, but can you smile when the result disappoints you? It is easy to be grateful when you get what you want, but can you be grateful when things don't go as planned? That is the true test of character. And when you master patience and gratitude in the face of failure, you rise to a level of inner strength that no worldly success can ever provide. You failed one test, but that does not mean the Almighty is displeased with you. Sometimes we confuse failure with punishment, when in reality it may be a sign of love. The Almighty wants to raise you higher, so He places obstacles in your path to purify your soul, to strengthen your resolve, to increase your reliance on Him. It is through hardship that hearts are polished, just as diamonds are formed under pressure and gold is purified through fire. Your failure is not abandonment. It may be preparation for something greater than you ever imagined. You failed one test, but you must remember that failure is temporary. No pain lasts forever. No wound remains open without healing. No night goes on without giving way to dawn. Your sadness will fade. Your disappointment will ease. And when you look back, you will see how this very moment played a part in shaping your future, even if you cannot see it now. You failed one test, but you still have the gift of choice. You can choose to see this as the end or as a new beginning. You can choose despair or determination. You can choose to give up or to rise again. That choice will define you far more than the result of one exam or one trial. Life is not about what happens to you. It is about how you respond to what happens. And with the help of the Almighty, you always have the strength to choose hope over despair, effort over laziness, patience over pani. See, you failed one test, but let that failure remind you of the vastness of life itself. This world is filled with opportunities, with knowledge to learn, with skills to develop, with people to meet, with blessings to experience. Do not tie your entire existence to one result. There are so many ways to grow, so many avenues to explore, so many doors to knock on. Sometimes failure forces you to widen your perspective, to realize that your worth does not depend on one outcome, but on the entire journey of your life. You failed one test, but the truth is you are still on the journey, and the journey is what truly matters. Nobody's path is smooth from beginning to end. Every single person you admire, every person you think has achieved something great, has walked through valleys of struggle. They too have faced nights of questioning, days of regret, moments of doubt, but they kept moving forward. And the reason they reached where they are today is not because they never failed. It is because they never stopped after failing. You failed one test, but think of the gift hidden within the pain. The sting you feel right now is proof that you care, that you want to achieve, that you long to succeed. If you felt nothing at all, it would mean you had no passion, no drive, no commitment. The pain is uncomfortable, yes, but it is also a sign that you are alive, that you have a vision, that you desire growth. And pain, when channeled correctly, becomes one of the greatest motivators. It can push you to levels of discipline, sacrifice, and resilience that comfort could never bring. You failed one test, but you are not walking this path alone. Every human being has experienced failure. The successful student, the thriving business person, the respected teacher, the admired leader, each of them carries stories of tests failed, opportunities lost, doors shut. But you rarely hear those stories because the world tends to celebrate the moment of success, not the years of struggle that came before. If only you knew how many times they fell before standing tall, you would realize that you are on the same path they once walked. You failed one test, but remember that failure does not erase effort. Sometimes we think that if the result is not what we wanted, then all the hours spent, all the energy given, all the sacrifices made were wasted. That is not true. The effort itself built you. It trained your mind. It disciplined your body. It shaped your habits. Even if the outcome was not what you hoped for, the process has already transformed you. And transformation is never wasted because it prepares you for the next challenge. You failed one test, but failure itself can become the reason you taste deeper success later on. It pushes you to review your mistakes, to recognize your weaknesses, to strengthen your foundations. Without failure, you might have continued in complacency, assuming you had nothing more to improve. But failure exposes where you truly stand, and it gives you the clarity to rise with greater determination. Many people who never fail early on end up collapsing later because they never learned how to handle disappointment. But those who fail and learn become unshakable when bigger challenges arrive. You failed one test, but you still have time. You are not defined by one moment, one day, one result. Life is a long race, and you are still running. Do not measure your worth based on a single stumble. The Almighty did not create you to die. Be up after one fall. He created you with resilience, with courage, with the ability to endure and to rise again. As long as you are breathing, the test is not over and your story is still being written. You failed one test, but you must understand that true success is measured differently. The world measures success by numbers, by certificates, by achievements written on paper. But the Almighty measures success by sincerity, by effort, by faith, by the way you respond when things don't go your way. If you continue to strive, if you refuse to surrender, if you turn back to Him in patience and gratitude, then you have already succeeded in ways the world cannot measure. You failed one test, but within that failure there is an invitation to reflect, to adjust, to improve, an invitation to rely less on yourself and more on the one who controls outcomes, an invitation to understand that your worth is not tied to worldly recognition, but to your connection with your Creator. Sometimes failure is the very knock on the door of your heart that awakens you to a deeper purpose, one that you would have missed had everything gone smoothly. You failed one test, but it does not define your intelligence or your ability. Intelligence is not proven by one exam, one project, one assessment. It is proven by the consistency of learning, by the hunger to grow, by the humility to admit mistakes and try again. The most intelligent people are not those who never stumble, but those who use every stumble as a lesson. They know that real wisdom comes not from never falling, but from learning how to rise better each time. You failed one test, but failure gives you the strength of perspective. It reminds you that life is bigger than one result, that happiness is broader than one achievement, that peace is found not in perfection, but in progress. Sometimes people pass every test, yet live in misery because they never learned to find peace in the journey. Failure teaches you that peace cannot depend on outcomes. It must come from within, from gratitude, from faith, from trust in the Almighty. You failed one test, but that very failure can make you more determined than ever before. Many of the world's most inspiring stories begin with rejection, disappointment, and defeat. Yet those same stories are celebrated because the people refused to stop there. They used the setback as a springboard. They turned their pain into fuel, their scars into strength, their obstacles into stepping stones. Your story can be no different if you choose to respond with resilience instead of despair. You failed one test, but in that moment of failure, you also gain clarity about who truly supports you. Some people will mock, some will criticize, some will disappear, but others will stand by you, encourage you, remind you of your worth, and uplift your spirit. Failure reveals who your true companions are, and it teaches you the value of sincere support. Treasure those who remind you of your potential when you doubt yourself, for they are blessings placed in your life for a reason. You failed one test, but do not let that failure become the lens through which you see yourself. Do not allow one result to convince you that you are incapable, unworthy, or doomed to repeat the same mistake forever. The human being is created with the ability to adapt, to grow, to improve. One failure can be left behind as long as you refuse to chain yourself to it. Do not imprison your heart in the past. Look ahead, because the future is still full of possibility. You failed one test, but the Almighty may use that very failure to write a story that inspires others. Perhaps your recovery from this moment, your courage to rise again, your patience in the face of disappointment will give hope to someone else who feels broken. You may not even realize the impact of your resilience, but your example could be the reason another heart decides not to give up. Sometimes your story is not just for you, it is for those who will walk a similar path after you. You failed one test, but remember that even failure is temporary. You will not feel this disappointment forever. You will not carry this pain forever. Time has a way of healing wounds, and with every step you take forward, the sting will lessen. One day you may look back at this very moment with gratitude, realizing that it played a role in shaping you into the person you became. What feels like the end today may one day be remembered as the turning point. You failed one test, but the future is still waiting for you with open arms. It does not ask whether you have fallen. It asks whether you are willing to rise. It does not ask how many times you stumbled. It asks whether you have the courage to keep walking. And the truth is, with faith, with effort, with patience, you will always have the strength to rise again. No matter how many times you fall,